Justice Opes was shot in front of his Woollahra home.
For a bomb blast which ripped through a crowded Jehovah's Witness church hall in
Shards of glass impacted into the body of the 12-year-old girl.
Sydney's 10,000 witnesses must be wondering what they've done to draw such violence upon them.
Observe the girl on the right in this photo. Her name is Trudi Warwick. She looks happy and secure in her mother's arms. But this photo hides a disturbing secret. Wherever Trudi and her mother go, violent bombings follow, and the truth behind the attacks will reveal one of Australia's most notorious serial killers. The attacker, known as the Family Court Bomber, terrorizes Sydney for years, and the entire community lives in fear, not knowing when or where he will strike next. Even the police can't keep little Trudi safe because one man is willing to set Australia on fire to get to her.
He stopped at nothing in his quest to keep custody of his daughter. He took it personally because everybody that stood in his way, he went after all of them.
Everyone was scared of him. Everyone who confronted him, their lives were in danger.
The police told me, you're next on his hit list.
I had to do something to stop all these killings. What choice did I have?
We are in June of 1978. Andre Warwick and her husband Leonard have just received their first daughter, Trudi. They live in Casula, a suburb of Sydney, Australia. Leonard is a firefighter, but while he spends his time at work rescuing people at home, he is controlling and violent with his wife. He quickly becomes possessive of his newborn daughter. He doesn't let anyone into the house or see her, not even Andrea's friends and family. On Andrea's birthday, her sisters and their children try to visit, enraging Leonard.
And they knocked on the door, and he wasn't going to allow them to come in. So I just pushed past him and I said, they're coming in. After they left, he got violent. And he had his fireman boots on, and he stood on my leg and just thrashed into my arm, ran in to try and pick up Trudi. I couldn't pick her up. My arm was bunged. I couldn't move it. I thought, this is it. She's going to kill me.
After years of enduring an abusive relationship, Andre finds the strength to leave and tell her family. She runs to safety at her sister Judy's house, begging for help. Judy is shocked to hear about Leonard's violence.
That was the first I knew. And I said to Andrea, why didn't you tell me? She said I was too ashamed and, I had no idea.
Due to the severity of the injuries that Leonard caused, Andre was unable to take Trudi out of the house, but she will not give up her fight to get her back. She turns to the family law court to start the divorce process, hoping they can help keep her daughter safe. She gets full custody of Trudi, and they move to the house of Andrea's father, Leslie, and her brother, Stephen. Leonard has visitation rights, but that's not enough for him. He keeps the daughter longer than he should, completely ignoring the visitation schedule. Leonard doesn't care about the court orders, and Andre decides to confront him to get Trudi back. Worried that Leonard might hurt her again, Andre asks her brother Stephen to go with her, and they approach Leonard together.
Stephen took Andrea up, knocked on the door and said, Len, look, we don't want any trouble. Because Stephen was very softly spoken. I don't think I ever heard him raise his voice.
Stephen calmly asks Leonard for Trudi, but Leonard slams the door, refusing to hand her over. Andre has to go back to court to ask for help to get Trudi back, but they have no idea how far her father will go to keep her. It's February 22nd, 1980. Andre wakes up hoping to say good morning to Stephen, but he's not in his room. At first, she doesn't think much of it, figuring he must be visiting his girlfriend or surfing with friends. But as the hours go by without news from him, she begins to panic.
Andrea says, we found Stephen. And I just automatically said, oh, is he all right? He says, we've got some bad news. That's when they told me.
Andre makes phone calls, but no one has seen Stephen since the night of February 21st. Something is terribly wrong. The police come to investigate the house, and they find bloodstains in his room. 6 days later, a group of friends is boating on Cowan Creek in Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park north of Sydney. Suddenly, they see something floating in the water. They call the police, who take over and start their investigation.
I was expecting to walk home. I didn't expect that. He had his whole life ahead of him. He was 25 years old. It never hurt anyone.
The police discover that Stephen Blanchard was shot and killed at home in the middle of the night. The attacker likely used a silencer to avoid waking up the rest of the family. Then they drove to Cowan Creek and used a boat to be able to throw his body in the middle of the water. His body was weighed down with bricks, and the investigators discover that they were tied with a firefighter's pocket line, but they find no other evidence that could help them catch the killer. The Blanchard family now has to face life without Stephen. While mourning the loss of her brother, Andrea also has to continue her custody battle. Leonard continues to ignore the court orders, keeping Trudi longer than he should repeatedly. In April of 1980, due to Leonard's constant disregard for the family court, Judge David Opus says he can't see his daughter for a month. Leonard is furious. When he sees Andre in the courthouse, he gives her a threatening message.
Is he going away on holidays? And he said, oh no, you just don't have to worry about him.
On June 23, 1980, at 7:10 p.m., 4 months after the murder of Stephen Blanchard, Judge David Opus is having dinner with his wife, Kristen, and their children, Josh and Persia, when the doorbell rings. His son, Josh, tells him to stay at the table and not answer, but he does. And when he goes to greet the person at the door, he is shot with a .22 caliber rifle. A man flees the scene and Judge Opus' family rushes to his side, but it's too late.
After the phone call from the police and told me that Judge Opus was murdered, when I put the receiver down, I thought, something's going on here. There's got to be, it's a connection.
Andre is already suspicious because Leonard was angry at Judge Opus for restricting his access to Trudi. Andre tells the police that she thinks Leonard is involved. The investigators search his locker at the fire station where he works. They find newspapers with headlines about the murder, but no physical evidence that could link him to the scene. Leonard also refuses to answer any police questions. As a family court judge, David Opus dealt with many people who could want revenge for his orders. 30 detectives work on the case. They interview over 500 people who appeared before Judge Opus in court, along with 2,500 people who bought rifles in the last 6 months. They can't find clues or get close to an arrest, and a killer is on the loose. The people of Sydney worry that the entire family court system may be the target. Another family court judge, Richard Gee, takes over Judge Opus's cases after his murder, and his family fears they may be next.
Well, I knew that Justice Opus had been shot dead, and then Dad said they've offered me the job to replace him. And I just had this, well, I don't know, call it sixth sense that something was going to happen to us.
Years go by without further attacks, and fear begins to fade. Andre tries to give Trudi a happy childhood, but the nightmare is far from over. On March 6, 1984, nearly 4 years after Judge Opus's murder, Judge Richard Gee is at home with his children, Allison and Stephen. It's around 1:45 a.m., and everyone is asleep. Suddenly, a bomb explodes, destroying most of the house.
Debris dust over his whole body, looked like a ghost, except that he had blood pouring down his legs from his thighs. I just cried. I just felt really sad. It just looks like a war zone.
Allison finds her brother and they frantically try to get out of the house, desperately hoping their father has also managed to do so. They manage to safely get out through a window. They find their father at the back of the house, injured but alive. Miraculously, the entire family survives, but it's clear that someone is still out for revenge. Immediately, the police alert other judges to check their homes and cars, and they search family courts throughout Australia. The investigators also look at all the cases that Judge Richard Gee oversaw. Andre again tells them that Leonard is to blame. Judge Gee had further restricted Leonard's access to Trudi, and he even issued an arrest warrant when he didn't return her.
This was an attack on the administration of justice in Australia. Judges would make a ruling against him, and he responded with lethal force.
We wanted justice served. It's Leonard John Warwick. I said, he is the only person. Every time I spoke to him, it's him.
Andre knows that her ex's violence is getting closer and closer to her, and she has to continually face the man who is stalking her in court. The next court hearing was scheduled for April 16, 1984, just over a month after the bomb at Judge Gee's house. But in the middle of the night before Leonard was due to appear, the family court building is largely destroyed when another bomb goes off. Fear and panic spread through Sydney. Again, Andre alerts the investigators to Leonard's connection to the attacks, but still he continues to walk free. It becomes clear to Andre that no one can keep her and Trudi safe from him, not even the police. He leaves no evidence behind, and unless someone can make him stop, anyone with connections to the family court is in danger.
We did know that the offender was Warwick. Everything was done that could be done at the time. We couldn't gather enough evidence to charge him then.
As Judge Richard Gee recovers from his injuries after the explosion at his house, Ray Watson takes over his cases, including those of Leonard and Andrea. Even with fear and suspicion growing, Andre still respects the visitation rights established by the court. Trudi loves her father and is happy to see him, but Andre has to keep going back to court because Leonard still ignores the court orders. Just like the other judges, Judge Watson punishes Leonard by further restricting his access to Trudi. It's July 4th, 1984, at 8:10 a.m., almost 3 months after the family court bombing. Judge Watson is getting ready to go to work. His wife, Pearl, opens the door of their house, unknowingly triggering a bomb that was attached to the front door. Ray Watson survives, but Pearl is killed instantly. The people of Sydney, stunned and heartbroken, demand answers. After the murder of Pearl Watson, the investigators step up their efforts. A joint federal and state police task force is established and a reward of $500,000 is offered.
All family court judges, their courts and their families will have a 24-hour surveillance until this matter is resolved.
We had federal surveillance officers and state surveillance officers. We used up virtually every surveillance officer in New South Wales and Australia.
Surveillance officers follow the main suspect, Leonard Warwick, desperate to find something they can use to catch him and put an end to all the attacks. In the middle of the night, they follow him to a national park.
He kept going back to the national park on a total of 11 occasions. We went in with police dogs after he left when he was way out of the area. It was never really ironed out as to what he was doing there. I put it down to the fact that he was playing games with the surveillance officers.
It's February 10th, 1985. The police inform Andre that there has been an attempted bombing on her lawyer's life with another bomb. Fortunately, it was found before it could detonate and no one was hurt. But soon after, she receives a call from her lawyer, Gary Watts.
And he said, I won't be able to act on your behalf. And that was it. He was scared. He was frightened. And I don't blame him.
I've never met a person as dangerous as what Leonard Warwick is. He stopped at nothing in his quest to keep custody of his daughter. He took it personally because everybody that stood in his way, he went after all of them.
Fear is spreading throughout Australia. Anyone can be a target, and no one can help Andre. Even the police are afraid of their involvement in the investigation.
One of the surveillance officers said, look, I think we've got a worry because Warwick's sitting in the park watching police headquarters. A witness that I interviewed said he was looking for my address. The wife and the kids, I had his police photo on the fridge, that if he was ever sighted in the neighbourhood, they would notify us immediately.
While Leonard intimidates the police with his own surveillance, the attacks continue to get closer and closer to home for Andrea. All the while, she tries to protect Trudi from the violence that haunts them, and it's taking a huge toll. Leonard already has his eyes on his next target as he makes phone calls to Andrea's sister, Judy, threatening to kill her and her children.
We didn't tell anyone why we were moving.
Even the drivers of the truck didn't know where we were heading until an hour before we got to Foster. No one knew. We sort of made it a fun game for the kids, a drill that if ever Len found us, we had an escape plan to get out.
Although Andre and the police believe that Leonard is responsible for all the attacks, they still haven't been able to find anything they can use to arrest him. They've tried surveillance, offered reward money, and put multiple detectives and resources into their efforts, but nothing is working. Andre is terrified. Leonard stalks her, often parking in front of the house and watching her every move. One day, he shows up at the house and yells at Andre, demanding to see Trudi for an unscheduled visit. When she says no, he grabs Trudi anyway and starts to run. But Andre chases him, refusing to let him take her away. In response, he punches Andre in the face. Shocked, she quickly picks up Trudi and runs back inside, locking the doors behind them. Andre is desperate to get away from him and his violence. Even with the threat to her life, Andrea's sister, Judy, steps in. A devout Jehovah's Witness, Judy turns to her congregation for help. They need to escape in secret to keep safe from Leonard. Her congregation mobilizes, helping them move so they could hide. Andre does everything she can to protect her daughter Leonard and the destruction that follows them. Leonard doesn't know where Andre and Trudi have gone, but he doesn't give up his search. He makes several phone calls to members of Judy's congregation, demanding to know where they are. In July of 1985, 5 months after Andrea and Trudi escaped, Leonard hasn't found them and there have been no more attacks, but there have been 2 break-ins at the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses in Casula, southwest Sydney. During one of the break-ins, a window breaks and cuts the intruder. They leave blood on the carpet, but with the limited capabilities of the time, the investigators can only determine that it's O positive, and they can't use it to charge anyone. They don't find out that nothing was stolen and no one knows why the intruder entered or what they did. It's Sunday, July 21st, 1985. The congregation begins their service as usual. There are over 100 members in the building, including Joy Wykes and her husband Graham.
We were holding hands and I thought, oh, his hand would be really cold. So we had a small rug over our knee and I pulled it up over our hands and he turned to me and whispered, I love you. And that was the last thing I remember. My first memories was really in ICU. I had already been into surgery. I recall asking, where's my husband all afternoon. A doctor came and told me, we do have bad news for you. And I'd been asking, and I must have already realised that he wasn't going to be there.
A bomb was placed under the stage in the Kingdom Hall, scheduled to explode during the service. Graham Wykes is killed and dozens of people are seriously injured, including small children. The Blanchard family is devastated to hear the news.
I just burst out crying. I could not speak for a long time.
They announced that the hall had been bombed. My daughter Natasha was standing next to me and she said, Mum, that was Len. My whole body was shaking. And I rang down the bomb squad. They had their suspicions. And I said, that's my congregation. And they said, oh, that's what the connection is.
Joy Wykes had helped the Blanchards prepare for the escape, and Andrea blames herself for Graham's death and all the injuries at the Kingdom Hall. The police take a search warrant to Leonard's house, and they find handwritten notes with phone numbers of Jehovah's Witnesses, but he refuses to answer any question or give a blood sample.
Everyone was scared of him. Everyone who confronted him, their lives were in danger.
The attacks continue to follow Andre wherever she goes, even as she escapes Leonard's harassment. She is overwhelmed with grief, fear, and guilt. She knows what Leonard wants and that people all over Australia will continue to die unless he gets it. Andre makes a heartbreaking decision in a desperate attempt to end his reign of terror. She grants him full custody of their daughter, Trudi. Over nearly 10 years, Andre has suffered immensely. She was in a physically and emotionally abusive relationship. She made the brave decision to leave, but her fight never stopped. Her own brother was murdered, and after 4 bombings, 3 murders, and families torn apart by violence and destruction. And Rhea knows she is the only one who can stop the family court bomber. Trudi spends her childhood living with Leonard, who many consider the family court bomber. At first, she enjoys living with her father. He even buys horses for them to ride together. But as she grows up, she realizes how controlling he is. He constantly tries to keep her at home, away from friends and family. And when he decides to marry again and start a new family, Trudi is not happy. At 16, she leaves to live again with her mother, and surprisingly, Leonard does not stop her. After getting everything he wanted and all the destruction and suffering he caused, Leonard lets his target, Trudi, go easily. The trial, which lasted almost 2 years and was held by a judge only, resulted in Warwick pleading not guilty to more than 20 charges against him. However, with the overwhelming evidence and the help of Andrea's testimony, he is convicted and receives 3 life sentences without parole. Leonard Warwick is finally behind bars and will never be able to hurt anyone again. After nearly 40 years living in fear, Andrea can truly start to move on with her life. She still has a very close relationship with Judy and Trudi, and they continue to honor Stephen's memory today. Andrea hopes her story brings awareness and support to survivors of domestic violence. Andrea stood up for herself to escape her abuser, and with the help of others who never gave up, she brought justice to many families across Australia who were impacted by the attacks.